Good afternoon. Welcome. It is the 13th of July. My name is Nicholas Barton. I am the founder and CEO of the Barton Partnership. I'm going to give it a moment or two just to allow you all to join this webinar today. As you can see, our panel have arrived, which is fantastic. Today, we're going to be looking at accelerating digital transformation through effective talent attraction, engagement and retention. As always, we've been very fortunate and humbled to be joined by a fantastic panel of individuals that will be sharing their experience with us today. Today is a special day for the Barton Partnership. It is our 15-year anniversary. It's 15 years since I founded the business. I certainly had a lot more hair when I started, but it's been a great journey over the last 15 years. We have gone through our own transformation, both digital and fundamental. So I can certainly share some of that as well. But just to do a quick introduction to the Barton Partnership for those who haven't come across the business before, and let me just see if I can change the slide, bear with me. There we go, the Barton Partnership. So we are a global search firm. We started 15 years ago with my office in London. Today we have 6 offices across the world, New York and Chicago, London, Paris, Singapore and Hong Kong. What defines the proposition is the fact that we only specialize, and we are specialists in strategy and transformation. By that I mean, working with individuals that in the majority of cases have got a consulting-based background, or certainly have worked in a strategy or transformation-orientated role. But that stretches across strategy and M&A, data and analytics, ESG and sustainability, transformation and change. We work across FTSE-listed organizations, investment banks, financial services, fintech, etc., private equity firms, professional services companies as well. So right across the broad spectrum. On the permanent search side, so 2 aspects to our business. We have permanent search, retained search business. We have a global network of 55,000 candidates. In the last 12 months, we've completed over 250 searches globally. We conducted a survey and looked at the placements we've made over the last 3 years, and 84% of the candidates we placed are still at the same company, which is fantastic. 52% are in the same company, but in a different, more senior role. So it shows from our perspective that we're not only finding the right candidate for the job, but the right employee for the company long term. We're very proud of that fact. On the independent consulting side, this is the interim side of our business, the independent consulting side of our business. We've got, again, a network of over 5,000 full-time independent consultants. And we've completed over 1,600 projects over the last few years. 75% of our clients have returned for further work. 98% have said that we meet or exceed their expectation. And this is the division where it enables us to parachute in short-term talent, either from 1 day up to 12 months or even longer than that, to fulfill any short-term gap in talent or delivery support when it comes to transformational strategy as well. And then on to today's discussion. As I mentioned at the start, we're looking at digital transformation through talent attraction, engagement and retention. 3 brilliant people. Claire Ainscough has joined us today, Chief People Officer at Ocado Group. Claire, thanks for joining us. She's commercially focused group global HR leader with an extensive background in talent development, acquisition and leading transformational change. She's now applying that skill, obviously, to a FTSE 100 business in her capacity with the Ocado Group. So Claire, thanks for joining us. Arvinda Bhatti is Chief Transformation Officer and Chief of Staff at Wipro. And in her role drives change and differentiation agenda for the business line and formulates and facilitates the execution of strategic initiatives to ambitiously drive the business. At Ideas, Arvinda runs Strategy and Transformation Office and has held various leadership positions in management consulting, IT services, and built and run new digital ventures throughout her career. Arvind, thanks for joining us. Good to see you. And last but not least, David Hurst. He's a senior client partner at Consera. Consera is a sister company to the Barton Partnership and the consulting arm of the Barton Partnership. David is a senior client partner with over 30 years experience of IT leadership, digital and IT strategy, and IT sourcing and outsourcing with industry-leading firms, having worked at Accenture, Ernst & Young, and A.T. Kearney. He served a range of high-quality clients in the last 7 years, working with Imperial Brands, the UK Gambling Commission, the Swiss Stock Exchange and HSBC. He's now working to deliver strategic and transformational initiatives through Consera. So David, thank you for joining us. So let me stop sharing this and bring the four of you into main screen. Good to see you all. Now, for those that have joined us, thank you. I try and make this as engaging as possible. If you have any questions during the course of this discussion, please do post it in the chat room. If it's relevant to the question in hand, I will bring it into the conversation. If not, I will try and do a quick 10-minute Q&A session at the end for the panel as well. But I will try and make this as engaging as possible. But let's go into the first question and get the process started. So Havind, I'm going to come to you. So question to start with, to get the ball rolling. Digital innovation continues to accelerate whilst many organizations are facing the great resignation. And certainly we're seeing that from our clients. What barriers are you seeing from a people and talent perspective? Havind, over to you.
That's a long question, Nick, but let me start by saying happy birthday. You must have shaken a lot of hands in that time.
Thank you very much. I have.
But going back to the question, I'll set the scene from a Wipro context, because probably as a business and the industry that we're in, we were really and still are in the spotlight when it comes to talent management and attrition and retention. We are a digital business transformation and technology company. So we're in the business of everyone else's transformation. And in that context, then the hot skills that everyone refers to in terms of developers, cybersecurity specialists, product owners, deep technology skills in cloud, data, AI, you name it, are all, sitting under the umbrella of Wipro. And if you look at the 220,000 workforce we have globally, it puts into context the importance of talent management and good processes that we all need as a living machinery. Now, in the last 2 years, COVID has definitely, for many reasons, accelerated demand in the market. And you can definitely see as a result a tension between the demand that is there and the supply that it exists. We are all over the world, but I'll just spotlight, in a very rapidly maturing market like Germany, for example. In Germany right now, there's probably nearly 800,000 people delta in cybersecurity specialists. Just one example to illustrate the gap between supply and demand. Now, from a Wipro perspective, talent management has always been a core capability. We are a high, our business model relies on human capital because we're a professional services company. So it's been always a core function of our business. But over the last 2 years, now with that talent and demand gap, we've seen the challenges, but really taken a positive spin on really understanding how you address it. It's a chance to embrace and re-examine what needs to be better and done better, and go over and beyond business as usual, really top to tail, from hiring into the different life cycles of talent management and retention and so forth. In that context, we have grown nearly tens of thousands in the last 2 years across regions, so it can be done. But how it's done, I think, is really more what's relevant to, answering the question. I think what's really been important is that alongside addressing, a good structured hiring machine, looking at talent processes when it comes to learning and development, what really has hit home to us is acknowledging that the understanding employees more as consumers is really important, and talking about career propositions, understanding that skills and high quality and high performing talent is really looking at a chance to grow, a chance to work and do great work with great people. So that career proposition as a package has to be communicated, understood, unpacked in many occasions, and reserved back just as you would do to a consumer, with meaningful application inside. So we have, last 2 years, have undergone substantial change in really developing strong career propositions in the different talent families that we cover, right from futurists right down to deep experts in various technologies. Secondly, and I think it's not talked enough because the headlines are all about attrition, retention, talent. The other thing that we have really done is focused on acknowledging the power of the team, and the exponential power of the team. Because yes, when we talk about talent management, it focuses on the one, but the exponential power of people coming together, especially when you look at digital transformation and the context in which you're solving often ambiguous, complex problems, which aren't linear, require multiple skills. So we've spent a lot of time in the last few years understanding the power of the team and how you create powerful mini ecosystems, as it were, and how systems and processes can support in enabling the quick creation of those ecosystems so they can come together at the right time with the right skills. The last thing I'd say is the emphasis on culture. What people don't know about Wipro is that we are a very philanthropic organization. $2 out of $3 we earn go to our foundation. And that's always silently in our history. But as we have explored deeper career propositions, obviously the emphasis is on growth, enabling people to flourish, providing meaningful and the right compensation. But underneath that all, if you look at millennials, if you look at anyone, 70% of people would answer that they need work with purpose. So we've gone very deep in exploring and understanding what it really means to work at Wipro and how you work, and the culture in which we're working is a powerful story to bring to new candidates, help them understand that how we deliver work and the purpose for which we deliver work is as important to us as the balance sheet itself.
And that's galvanized, and you feel that's galvanized the business as well. And are the the existing employees, did they align themselves to the new model going forward as well?
Yes, I think actually it's been easier for people that have been with us for a longer time. It's been you inherently understand. For newer talent coming into the organization, it's something that we've never spoken about, but yes. But the other thing is also that as people join organizations, one can talk about values, but actually culture is more about behaviors and actions, right?
100%.
And so I think, just one micro example, during hiring and the time in which people have multiple touch points to different parts of the organization, syncing them so that you can actually, see those behaviors and actions in motion, right? And that really means enabling and opening up the hiring process so that candidates can meet and greet many parts of the organization through different levels and through different practices, going back into the power of the team. So if someone is joining our sustainability practice, for example, they have exposure very early on in the process to perhaps what we are doing in our engineering and chip design division. It all comes together eventually to how they succeed in the stories they have to tell when they join.
Fantastic. Thank you. Great. Claire, your views on that, please.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that was, I don't know how much I can add on what Harvinder said, because that is just a brilliant introduction, I think, to the challenges around some particularly around digital talent, but around the broader ecosystem. Just to give you a bit of a view about my role, because I think if the audience is predominantly from the UK, people tend to think about Ocado as being the grocery delivery service, so an already online business, in fact, the first purely online grocery business. But now, I think it's nearly 3 years ago now, we sold half of that business to Marks and Spencer's. So there is a joint venture that sits in the middle of Marks and Spencer's and ourselves. That business runs independently from a sales and marketing perspective. And then Marks and Spencer's and us provide services into that business. So on our side, we provide the technology, so all the technologists that sort of work for that, but also the logistics, the drivers, those people. And of course, Marks and Spencer's provides their wonderful food and their products that come in from their side. And of course, this is helping Marks and Spencer's online transition, which you sort of seen have been underway. And from our side, sort of the last couple of years have just been that incredible scaling growth, what you've seen for online businesses, and things like grocery delivery in particular being at the center of actually so much of what's happened in terms of the news. You know, in COVID, it was about people being able to get access to groceries. And now a lot of the conversation is much more about actually the inflation of food and are these basic services affordable? And of course, a brand like Ocado being at the premium end of that, what does all of that mean? We then took the proposition, which are these, if you haven't seen the video, just you look at what our hive and our robots look like. It's absolutely incredible technology. That we build these incredible automated warehouses, and we now sell them to grocers all over the world. And really what we've seen through COVID is the demand for people thinking about online grocery has just rapidly grown. Yeah. And for us being able to figure out what that model is, how we sell it quicker, how we build things quicker, how we make these robots lighter, faster, you know, and, you know, even to the point that Harvinder's making about cyber become really critical, because we are then connected to each of these partners. We have people like Kroger in the US, Casino I was in Paris last week, so with our partner Casino there. We've got Aeon in Japan, Sobeys in Canada, Coles in Australia. We've got 12 of these partners. That business that supports that, we sort of internally referred to it as being our client business, so the one that sells to our clients, is around 6,000 people, half of which are in our technology organization, and then half of which are people like engineers who build these sites and other pieces. And the conversation really through COVID, which is one we've sort of experienced ourselves with our logistics business, that's the third part. So we have 15,000 people that are on the front line in the UK. We have these 6,000 people that are in the client business, and then we have the retail business. It's just the labour shortages that are now coming out of the sort of post-COVID world, and the ability to attract. And therefore, our partners desire to be able to move quicker by building these automated warehouses, because what they see is this long-term future of people not wanting to do the least desirable jobs, whether that be in a freezer or in other parts. And we know, from our own experience of running those logistics organizations, the more efficiency we can put into our own business and into that of our clients, it significantly helps. And so the journey has been quite interesting, because the shifting plates of just what people want, how quickly they want it, and then you sort of couple that with just the shortage of talent that is out there. I read a stat this week that said there's probably only going to be one person for every 700 jobs in the next couple of years if it carries on as it is. I mean, some of the stats are just astonishing when you look at it. Yeah. And I agree with Hubin totally on things like cyber is just it's one of those spaces that is hard to attract. Things like the robotics side for us are equally very difficult. And so part of what the core of the business does is actually solving for this challenge in the long term by looking at labour, but in the short term, how we continue to build and attract. And some of the things we're up against, which I imagine will resonate with people on the call. You sort of strip it back and say, look, at the heart of it, people can earn much more money. Some of the big West Coast firms are announcing that you can earn West Coast salaries but be based anywhere in the world, and that you can be fully remote. So you're up against these competition for jobs every single time. And therefore, really what was resonating with what Harvin was saying is about the quality of the work, the purpose and the culture becomes so front and center to be able to attract, because if every time you have to respond on salary, you're not going to be able to do that.
Okay. And on that then, I mean, if I lead into then the next question, because there is a direct linkage now, you've talked about how you've adapted to become, as you say, in a more competitive market to attract the talent. But actually, are you adapting the candidate profiles as well? Have you adapted what you're looking for in terms of capability and skill set in any respect?
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, I think, the jobs are the jobs. We're looking at ways that you can automate and all of those things. The two areas I think we have started to have a look at more seriously are, how can we propel the early career model? So if you take all of our data, the people who join us at early career are more likely to stay, more likely to be promoted, more likely to be engaged in terms of the culture of the organization. We just see this rapid growth. And I think we've always been relatively conservative, but what we've started to say is, actually, if we want to attract these ginormous numbers of people, that's seeding in a very systematic way of early talent and the programmatic way we put that in. I think the other piece is just what we'd always historically had was each of our dev centers, and we've got them all over the world, right? So we've got Barcelona, we've got a couple in Poland, in Bulgaria, we've just bought a business in Greece, San Francisco, Toronto. We always had defined pods of people based in each that were doing specific work. I think we're needing to open our mind a bit more to saying, you know, the interesting work can be based in any of these locations, and maybe even in places where we don't have locations today. So how open-minded can we be about locations? So whilst the jobs might not fully change, the seeding and the locations and things like that, I think, are becoming absolutely front and center.
And a quick question that's already come in around, I guess, the inclusion policy with Ocado. Have you extended it out to disability as well? And what strategies have you included around that, and how have you communicated that out to the market?
Yeah, I mean, the disability one is certainly, you know, it's definitely an area that we've been looking at, particularly because it flows through to what we do with our consumers. So the website we develop and then sell, both, you might see that with Ocado, but also to others. The accessibility in that is one of the key features that we talk about making our consumers' lives easier through accessibility, and therefore then how that translates internally. And I was looking at some stats yesterday in our technology division, for example. I think it's just under 10% of our employees identify with having some form of a disability in whatever form that might come. And what we're trying to do is think about how do we help those people to be even more successful. And we just, I don't know, people on the call might use this tool, but we use an engagement tool called Peakon. And what it allows us to do is do huge profiling of our organization, both in terms of gender, ethnicity, social mobility, and disability, and also people's sexual orientation as well. And then we can have a look at them mapping that against their experience in the workplace. And so we've just done that next big data capture, and that's how I know, you know, some of those stats around what our technology organization is looking like. It's a brilliant, the technology organization in particular has been a pretty accessible place for people with disabilities, but I think there's more we can even do. Yeah, but it really connects to our consumer piece, which often, if you can make that connection for your inclusion policies to join end to end, it makes it really compelling. And I think it's a story that resonates with our employees in particular.
Great. David, I'm going to bring you in. You've been sitting there very patiently. So a consulting report that came out recently has shown that the success rate for transformations is consistently low. What are the key strategies for digital transformation, and how can organizations set themselves up for success? I guess what we want to look at here is how can organizations assess the value of digital transformation efforts, and whose responsibility is it? Are you on mute, David? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, the characteristics of a effective approach to digital transformation. I mean, it starts with the strategy about setting not just the financial targets, but making it clear to everyone what steps you're going to take to achieve those goals. You know, what we don't want here is the 100-page deck. What we need is it must be able to be very straightforward to explain the reasons why you're going to achieve the goals that you'll set out to your employees. I mean, Accenture was quite good at this sort of thing. As they moved between markets, you know, they went from being a consulting business into SI, and then when I was there, they moved from SI into BPO and became hugely successful in that area. Everyone knew exactly what was required. The investment was very clear. Second thing was the sponsorship was uber clear, and everyone knows that that's, you know, a thing that you need to get right in terms of transformation. I think the trick is you need to sustain that support from the top to make sure that the leaders don't just kick off the initiative, but they are actively involved in as you develop, and also changing. failing fast. If there are things in the transformation journey that aren't working, it's really important to be able to stop them. And this can be a problem in a digital transformation. Sometimes there's too much investment in a particular direction, and to admit that a certain part of the strategy is not working, and to fail fast and course correct is absolutely key. And then finally, of course, the monitoring and measuring is a key thing. Is we need to define the parameters up front. There tends to be a focus on the financial things, such as the percentage of spend on digital transformation versus the whole, or the percentage of leader remuneration linked to digital. But I feel that the thing that's missing is to connect those with the more operational measures, things like time to market, and the turnover of talent, and retention and employee engagement skills. I think the main change that I'm seeing in digital transformation is the objective to which people are trying to pursue. If you were to look back 10 years, it would all of it would be about economics. It would be about profit or shareholder value. Now the biggest change that I see is the focus now on ESG, or environmental, society and governance. It's 40% of our permanent hires into professional service firms are in the ESG area. So they've realized this is where things have changed. It's a question of a different set of objectives and a move away from purely financial targets through to the contribution that a enterprise is making in environmental or society, and are they governing themselves in a responsible way?
Thank you. Arvind, can I ask you the same question, please?
Yes, and I'll echo a little bit about what David said as well, but I'll come at it from the perspective of a practitioner, having been many years in the midst of client transformations. And I actually am more optimistic around the success rate than I was, that one could be maybe 10 years ago. And there's two reasons for that. I think now, along with cloud services, cloud beyond infrastructure, but cloud services, specifically focusing on certain industry models, is something that can be leveraged more purposefully. So that is one enabler supporting success. And I think also the acknowledgement of blended teams, that business and technology working hand in hand. And if you're on client, if you're a business trying to go through transformation, the need to have a very aligned coupling between that. But I go back to two very simple success criteria from my perspective. When you look at leadership and the upper echelons of an organization, I think the clarity of what business impact they want to drive. And that could be a financial impact in terms of, new growth, new markets, scalability. It could be an OpEx impact, an operating model impact. Equally, new product design, new experiences. But there's, I think, clearer focus on, what is really that narrative that we want to create. And that being drilled down constantly within execution, right? The second element where I feel that we have greater chances of success is this correlation between viability, feasibility, and desirability, the constant, orchestration and checkpoints that you need in an initiative. The situations, bringing in what David's point about sustainability. If you're looking at and bringing in Claire Ricardo as well, I may be making too many assumptions, but just to illustrate a point, if you're looking at how robots interact, in a warehouse, for example, there's a sustainability case that you can create as an organization. Could be ambiguous initially, but as you go from viability, desirability, feasibility into understanding, how do you orchestrate a solution eventually? The the success metrics now and the criteria for success and really creating aligned teams is necessary. So I think, just to answer your question, clarity of the strategic narrative, the business impact you want to make, and that really aligned to multifunctional teams according to the skills you need there.
And again, this leads into the next question, so it's working really well. The sort of the cultural shift needs to come back to, I suspect what you'll answer is the purpose around it as well. Is that the key driver to aligning and having an effective digital transformation program and a new way of working? How do you align the cultural shift that needs to happen has to be driven by the purpose that's driving the transformation in the first place?
It does. And if I take purpose as the business impact, for example, and keep it very, very simple for the purposes of the conversation. But if we think, design, and execute as, three phases, they don't happen as a linear process anymore. So often in that orchestration, you're collaborating with people within your organization, could be technology experts, could be risk, could be legal, marketing, commercial folks, could be people outside of your organization, partners, product platform organizations. So, really coming to a partnering where that narrative is understood and that purpose of the impact you want to create at the end of the day, whether it's an experiential element, whether it's sustainability outcome, getting to a point of differentiation equally is going to be bringing people in that perhaps you may have excluded out. The trust equation in a team that is maybe not in your organization traditionally has to be high.
Yeah.
And that is, one element of Vipro's own transformation, right? How do you go from a vendor supplier to a partner to a trust equation where, I go back into, I have a banking and insurance background, right? And if I look at how do you create differentiation in some risk compliance processes or underwriting, creating differentiated algorithms in AI, right? You need a lot of trust with your partner to get to that point where you persistently creating that differential advantage in your operating model. So there is a lot that equally, one, in a client's organization or as a brand, you need to drive. But I think that must equally come from your partners, and you must both embrace the power of the impact you can create. But it takes very mature thinking and mature leaders and empowerment on both sides to get there.
Thank you. David, from your perspective, where have you seen sort of transformation programs break down when it comes to sort of team alignment, etc.? It's certainly in this new way of working now, what do companies need to be considering?
If you look at the companies that have been successful in changing their cultures, because it used to be in the 90s, they said in change programs, if you have to change the culture, then it's too difficult, try something else. But now we're seeing that there are companies that are being successful in doing that. So if you take HSBC and Unilever, for example, they have managed to drive cultural change, not just in their employees, but building in what Havin was saying, there's a necessity to take your partners with you. That's particularly true for ESG, where you're looking for down the supply chain to look at your total impact on providers across the world, but across and society in general. And how they appear to do it is they define the cultural change that's necessary from the top, but it's an absolute relentless focus on it. And it's almost in everything they do, a constant trying to shift their organization and their supply chain towards this new way of thinking. So I'd say that they're the companies that an example of how culture can be changed, but it does take years and a relentless focus.
Thank you. We're getting some great questions through. I will try and address these towards the end. So thank you for that. Claire, I'm going to bring the next question to you then. So Many organizations have adopted a hybrid workforce post-COVID. How can organizations effectively lead digital transformation in this new dynamic? How have Ocado approached this?
Yeah, I mean, I think as we're thinking about things, I mean, the sort of real advantage from hybrid working is almost the case for change starts to be a lot clearer, because people are recognizing their own need for transformation. And if I go back to what have been said earlier about the sort of employee as consumer, they're recognizing the need for digital transformation absolutely everywhere. So in some ways, the case for change is a lot clearer. I think, although I think people are tired for change, I think the amount of change that it turns out humans can cope with and have dealt with is also absolutely phenomenal. And just when you think there's one thing done, the next thing is hitting us and the next thing. So the pace of everything we're dealing with is much quicker. For me, I think the couple of watch outs are the communication, I think, is going to have to be a lot clearer. You picture those old-fashioned worlds where a big announcement would be made and then people would grab you afterwards in the hallway. You'd see people's face in the room and you'd go, I need to grab X, and just think about that. It's not to underestimate the power of those things in the moment. Were just huge, and really is what often made, we put all our effort as HR professionals into the exact wording in the announcement, but actually it's the things that happen after that, those human interactions. And for me, it's finding other methods to do that. Where it can be in person, I think that's going to be super important and super effective. But finding ways that leaders can do hangout spaces where people can just join, making sure that you're having to work double time on checking in. And of course, the other thing that we've realised through COVID, which it may or may not be new, but it's just the idea of just people's well-being and how fragile some people are with the amount of change, with the personal things they're dealing with. Of course, at the moment with digital transformation, people can often make an assumption, whether it's true or not, that might result in job savings somewhere else, and in what looks to be a fairly likely recession. Making sure that the well-being of people, if you go through change and that has any negative connotations, of course, is really important.
Perfect, thank you. Arvind, anything to add to that on that question?
Oh, I think you're on mute there, Nick.
Oh, can you hear me?
There you are, yeah.
There we go. Sorry, Arvind, anything to add to that?
I'm going to pick up on what Claire mentioned in terms of town halls, just as a moment in, a daily life that we can all gel around. I think that those announcements, the narrative, the communication that is necessary when you have hybrid working is doubled, absolutely. And I see that in even not only the macro announcements, but even the micro situations when you have programs or projects running. Often, working from home in a environment when you're on Zoom or Teams, and there are other ones out there, leads you to very perfunctory transactional communication. And I think it has its time and its moment when you have rhythms and patterns in the discussions that you're trying to solve. There are other circumstances that just lend and blend themselves to needing to go back to the office where you just got to scratch your heads together. And so I think the emphasis on hybrid is really important. The second thing I would add is you got to care. Just that outreach as an organization at all levels, whether you're leadership, whether you're running a team, you got to care and turn around to the person who is next to you, whether they're sitting in Hong Kong, but they're still part of your team, you got to care. And this is where actually I'm very optimistic, because you posed the question, Nick, at the beginning of the challenges that we face.
Yes.
Where I've said that Vipro's flipped it. I think you got to look at this situation as a glass half full moment in reevaluating, what it means to work, to be an employer, and what you own as individuals to your colleagues, and what you own as a company to your employees.
What did Wipro, just for reference, Claire, I'll ask the same question about Ocado. What's Wipro's official policy now when it comes to work, just for reference?
You're asking me now around many different countries.
Yeah, right. From a UK point of view, what's the UK policy?
So it's very much hybrid.
Okay. Have you defined a set number of days, or have you left it?
We've left it to the power of the team to decide according to the patterns that they need to succeed according to their jobs. And so in that is giving away a lot of empowerment to folks to agree within their teams what works best for them, because every situation is different.
Yeah.
And, I think, as just a quick litmus test, when we've been at it now, I'd say nearly 9 months, where offices in the UK have opened at different degrees, that people are getting into patterns that suit them best and suits their work best. Are probably happier as a result of getting to a balance. But in all circumstances, I'm just going to bring in FOMO, right? What you don't want is people being in the office and others being at home and feeling there's a fear of missing out. So you have to create within your individual teams what works best.
Claire, what's the Ocado policy right now? How have you?
Yeah, so obviously we have a huge amount of workers who just can't do this at all. We've got obviously the big logistics force, people that are on engineering sites. For those that are in office roles, for the majority, there are some slightly different team dynamics, but for most people, we've sort of said the ideal would be that they're in the office 2 days a week. But in most cases, we don't care if that's 2 days a week or 8 days a month, or even over a bit of time. Like if you want to come in, if your team needs best to work with a sprint of a week and then you don't come in again for the rest of the month, then make that work for you. We're finding most people are coming in. It's actually probably slightly less than 2 days a week is the reality. Right. And then what we said is for most people, they don't need to come to the office at all in August because, just extended childcare month for, the bit really between Christmas and New Year. We just don't expect people to do that. And then the other thing we launched was a work from anywhere policy, which allows anybody to work from almost anywhere in the world, safety and other bits depending, but for a month a year. So, and that's outside of even that August or other time. So if you've got a family based in Poland and you want to go and spend a month working there, or one of my team just spent a month in Canada, you figure out what you need to do to make your job work for that period. And it's just giving people that choice and flexibility. And ultimately, I think, people being able to choose how they work is quite important. We do, though, really have massive advantage from bringing people together in how they solve problems. So it's still important. And the question for us right now is, what do we do? I think there's definitely one part of that, but what else can we do to make the offices more attractive? Our previous offices were just running out of space. They were hard to be in, no meeting room space. And so now, because there's fewer people in, we're actually trying to get some better furniture, like look at the rooms, make sure the technology is working, some pods where you can go and be if you've got conference calls, but ultimately just spaces where you want to see other humans and hang out and do cool work feels like the right thing to do to attract people to come back in.
Yeah, great. Good. David, next question for you. Effective change management is critical for large-scale digital transformations. What advice would you offer to align an organization around digital transformation successfully? Should these digital initiatives be driven by top-down or bottom-up? Again, you're on mute. Apologies.
In terms of top-down and bottom-up, I would say that obviously you need to do both, or rather, you need to start with top-down. Start with the sponsorship and setting the vision, but you very quickly need to get into the left to right view. That's to say, taking the customer view and then working back through the value chain and getting alignment on that. So sponsorship is the key, and as I say, it's the business of retaining that sponsorship, and it's really the job of change management to build support in the business. And the sort of the techniques that we identify is, once you've got the core team aligned, you look for allies in the business, not necessarily senior people, but influential people. So you build up, it's a bit like an onion. You start with the core team in the center, and then you bring allies in, people that that are well regarded in the company, and you gradually expand the involvement in the change program. And also, you do have to recognise that there will be some people that are not up for it, and that's just all part of it, unfortunately. But yeah, so the effective change management is absolutely to focus on the people side of things. Once all the technical stuff has been sorted out in the original diagnostic, and it's just about that relentless focus on people communication and getting everyone to go in the same direction.
Okay, fine, perfect, thank you. Havind, anything to add to that from your perspective?
Just very briefly, David's mentioned relentless a few times, and I just can underscore that it's the pace of what we're all going through, from whatever spectrum and industry we come from, what is here and now, and the underlying operating models we're building. There's going to be persistent change going through it. We're going to be operating digital era businesses, and operating digital era businesses means just persistent churn, through the pipes, and that is opportunity. But within that comes then the responsibility around the whole people management that doesn't stop, and the talent, optimization, the talent building, the talent flourishing, and opportunities you need to create as that system moves and flexes. So I think we're going into a time of what we understood before is substantially changing. I think this is a moment where we are still understanding, right? And me as an management consultant have to undo a lot of things and rethink a lot of things. And we're all doing that individually, that's for sure.
Thank you, perfect. We've touched upon this, but I just want to dig into this a little bit more just for a couple of minutes. Longer hours, obviously, heavier workloads. I mean, we talk about working at home. There's obviously been a debate about the separation between work and home. You walk out of the lounge into the kitchen, etc., etc. How are employees supporting their teams to reduce the risk of burnout and prioritising mental health? I guess as an example, what has Ocado done to support those initiatives?
Yeah, I mean, if I think about actually my own team, because this is something I personally feel as a leader as much as an HR leader.
Yeah.
And I actually, well before the pandemic hit, I'd hired a head of well-being, because I think just making that connection in a business that cares so much, very rightly, about the physical health and safety of a site, expanding that to think about the mental well-being of employees as well, it is such an important area. And really, the constant wrestle I personally have, and I don't magically come with these answers, is what is the responsibility of the organization? And often you're trying to make a case that talks about, well, less time with people out of the organization. But honestly, morally, I just think organizations, for the amount of time people spend there and the access to help, have got a responsibility. And often the causes that you've talked about in terms of workload and stress and pressure are something that very rarely exists for people in reality. If I take my own team, I see it in three key ways. The first is what do I see my job as being? And it is really to create a culture where people feel comfortable to talk about the things that they need to say, that there is that transparency. But I see my job as removing the big systematic long-term barriers that exist around things like workload and things like that. So that actually might be digital transformation of our own, as we think about, better systems that mean we don't have that manual work that creates pressure for people. I see my job as identifying those big things, and often they're multi-year expensive programs that remove things. For my own leadership team, for managers, my expectation is that we create an environment where we ask people how they are, and then we actually pause to listen to the answer, that we actually give people the space and time to tell us their reality. And one of my fundamental strategic goals is about how we listen to employees. So the engagement survey and the feedback is one, but actually that's just useless unless you've got managers being, someone mentioned, I saw it pop up on the chat, but just the power of human centricity today in the digital world is even more prominent. The way I like to think about our own org is it's humans that are powering these robots. So what are those humans doing, and what's their response?
Yeah.
But actually, I'm really clear with the organisation at the third level of that is that individuals have got a responsibility. And what I mean by that is you've got to tell us when something isn't working, and we've got to find ways that that is a safe space for them to tell us. So much access to help. We use a product called Unmind, which is a proactive way that people can manage their health and get access to services. We've got the reactive EAP. You've got your access to your line manager. You've got access to your peers. Just say, look, I'm struggling right now.
Yeah.
But unless you know, one of my big frustrations when people say, oh, I don't have time for lunch, or I don't have time to go for a walk. Actually, in today's world where you are working in a hybrid way, if you don't set your own barriers, actually that will take over. There is no doubt that every day there is probably more work for everybody than time. So skilling people, but equipping them to have the conversation and actually just drawing their own boundaries is what will skill my team for whatever future roles they take as well.
Thank you very much. Great. Okay, we're getting close to the end then. So just a final question, then I'll see if we can slot in a couple of the questions from the audience. Final top tips. What are your top tips when it comes to thinking about immediate actions employers can implement to drive greater retention within their business? So I'm sure we've covered a lot of this already, but Harvin, from your perspective, what would you say are your top tips that employers can implement to drive greater retention within their business in this current market?
I go back to career propositions and just unpacking that a little. I think what is important is when we look at tailored learning journeys, you know, especially with the vast amount of skills and discrete skills, you know, it's the depth and breadth that you need to understand and help individuals then to match what they really want to be great at. And that's quite a lot of different journeys that you have to be ready to catch and build as an organization. So that is one. And then the other element is when it comes to retention is ensuring that, you know, you are doing great work. That sounds obvious, but when you've got a high performance culture, you've got to eliminate especially the drudgery of work that could be taken. And in Claire's example, it's bots in warehouses. In our example, it's the drudgery of maybe just filling in expense reports and how you automate all of that process. But it's really eliminating that X% so you can focus on the bits that you really enjoy. And that's where in whatever industry you're in, there's a ratio of where you can automate work, even if you're in professional services, as an example.
Okay, thank you. Claire, your views on this?
I mean, the two things for me, I already mentioned listening. I think if you can find ways to tune into your employees, listen to what they actually want, you will create strategies, cultures, policies, whatever the things are that really matter. And I think that exists at both the company level and the individual level. The other one for me that, and I know people will be on the call from a whole range of different roles, but ultimately, I think manager quality is at the heart of almost everything, right? You can put whatever systems and processes, but if you've got human leadership that really cares about people, that can actually get to the heart of the individual piece, and you know, it's part of the listening strategy. But I think if organizations can do one thing well, it's focus on how they hire really, really good quality managers and leaders that then actually they kind of eliminate a lot of the need for the other stuff that you do.
Thank you. David, thank you.
So I think this is an area where the consultancies do quite a good job. I mean, there's a huge focus on hiring the right people. I mean, it's industrialized in the companies that I've worked for. And then giving a clear career progression, because great people want to progress and they have to see that the investment is being made in them. And so giving the clear markers of what they need to do to get to the next level was a key part of it, but also to the training and the constant transparent feedback regularly, and so positive and supportive. But it's that I would say was the best way to engage with the workforce, get them aligned with the behaviors that you want to reinforce, and take you with them on the journey. And so that's why consultancies consistently do well in in the sort of companies that young people want to work for.
Okay, thank you. All right, we've got time for one question, and I'll throw this to the floor. Is purpose sufficient, or do we move to essence, which is completely differentiated and aligned to both corporate and brand strategy in order to drive better transformation programs which engage all stakeholders and build strong strategic brands? Who would like to have a crack at that question? So is purpose sufficient, or do we move to essence, which is completely differentiated? Hovind?
I'll have a go on behalf of my colleagues.
Thank you.
So I'm going to bring it down to whether it's purpose, essence, values. Link it back to what Claire said. It's around the individuals, the managers, and the behaviors. If you can define as much as you want on paper about what you'd like to be and who you be and who you'd like to represent, but if the people representing you and that purpose or that essence are not doing that, that is what you have to change. So great leaders who care, listen, half of the job is done when you have at manager level and at leadership level the right people and the right actions in place, because whatever is on paper has to translate to employees seeing that actively being done and said and lived.
Perfect way to end. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for taking that question. So again, let me extend a big thank you to Hovind, to Claire, and to David for joining us today. Fantastic discussion. Thoroughly enjoyed that. This will be available and we will be sharing it with those that have signed up for today's webinar. Thank you for joining us, the guests that are here. And again, thank you to the panel. Hope everyone has a great day. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.